Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into some of the most extraordinary and, quite frankly, highly debated archaeological claims out there. Ron Wyatt's search for the Ark of the Covenant. Now, whether you view these accounts as profound spiritual truths or just fascinating modern folklore, the narrative in our sources weaves together ancient history, incredibly gritty archaeological digging, and some truly striking biological claims. We're going to unpack exactly what Wyatt reported finding right beneath the streets of Jerusalem. Let's get into it.
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with hiding the ancient Ark, move on to Jerusalem excavation process, explore the crucifixion connection, examine the testing of ancient blood, uncover the Ten Commandments, and finish up with a final prophetic witness.
All right, part 1, hiding the ancient Ark and the Babylonian siege of 586 BC.
Our story begins over 2 millennia ago during a time of immense historical turmoil. In 586 BC, the Babylonian army besieged Jerusalem and destroyed Solomon's temple. But here's a fascinating detail the sources point out from the biblical texts. The Babylonians kept meticulous records of the bronze pillars, shovels, and pots they looted. Yet major religious artifacts, like the Ark of the Covenant, were conspicuously missing from that inventory. They literally just vanished. And the narrative suggests the Ark sat completely undisturbed from that siege through the crucifixion of Christ around 33 AD, all the way until an amateur archaeologist named Ron Wyatt began digging in 1979, finally claiming to breach the hidden chamber in 1982. It's an absolutely staggering historical timeline we're looking at here.
So, where did it go? Well, according to the sources, the biblical context for the missing Ark is found in the ancient text of 2nd Maccabees. The record hints that the prophet Jeremiah actually anticipated the fall of Jerusalem, and he secreted the Ark, the tent, and the altar of incense away in a cave. The story goes that when his companions tried to mark the path, Jeremiah sharply reprimanded them. He declared the place should remain absolutely secret and unknown until God gathered his people together again.
Moving right along to Section 2, a Jerusalem excavation process, digging through bedrock. Let's fast forward to 1979. Ron Wyatt, who was actually a nurse anesthetist by trade, claimed he was guided by a divine impulse, pointing to a trash-filled area near the garden tomb known as Jeremiah's Grotto. With permission from the authorities, he and his sons started a multi-year effort to dig straight through the solid bedrock of Mount Moriah. And you have to imagine the sheer physical toll of this. Wyatt claimed his team had to heavily modify their tools just to maneuver. They were using short shovels with the handles cut off, hauling out massive amounts of rock and debris, bucket by manual bucket, in these impossibly tight, dusty tunnels. Eventually, alongside standard metal detectors, they brought in specialized long-range frequency detectors calibrated specifically for gold, and according to the sources, those devices repeatedly pointed them directly to a hidden chamber below. Then, there's this striking moment during the excavation. Wyatt asked a small, local assistant to squeeze through a tiny chimney-like shaft they'd found. Almost immediately, the young man comes scrambling back out. His eyes are wide with absolute supernatural terror, and he's shouting, "What's in there? What's in there? I'm not going back in there." The guy actually abandoned the site entirely. So Wyatt enlarged the hole himself, crawled inside, and claimed to find a cavern packed to the brim with rocks, animal skins, and wooden boards, which were hiding the temple furnishings.
Which brings us to part 3, the crucifixion connection, bridging the cross and the cave.
What's really fascinating about this geographical layout is how it supposedly connects the physical cave to the crucifixion site of Christ. You see, Wyatt's team wasn't just digging randomly. They were digging along the Calvary escarpment. At the surface, they uncovered cutouts in the stone wall, the kind traditionally used for Roman execution signs, and a square hole carved into the bedrock, which Wyatt identified as the exact cross hole used for the crucifixion. The sources claim that right next to this cross hole there was a massive fissure. Wyatt reported that when Christ died, the violent earthquake recorded in the Gospels split the bedrock open, creating a crack that extended 20 feet straight down, connecting the surface-level execution site directly into the ceiling of the hidden chamber where the Ark had been sitting for 600 years. To really grasp the significance of this, we need to understand the concept of the mercy seat. According to biblical tradition, the mercy seat was the solid gold lid of the Ark, essentially acting as the earthly throne of God. Under the Old Covenant, the high priest had to sprinkle animal blood on it once a year to atone for sins. The sources assert that God purposely orchestrated the placement of the Ark precisely under the cross. Why? So that Christ's own blood would fall down through that earthquake crack directly onto the western side of the mercy seat.
This leads us right into Section 4, testing the ancient blood, the scientific breakthrough.
Now, this brings us to what is probably the most shocking claim of this entire explainer: the scientific laboratory testing of ancient dried blood found resting on that very mercy seat. Wyatt claimed that an angel he encountered in the cave instructed him to take a sample of this dark, dried substance to a credible laboratory in Israel for genetic analysis. The sources outline a very precise, challenging lab protocol. Actually, standard biology dictates that it's absolutely impossible to get a chromosome count from dead, dried blood, because you need living white blood cells for that. But Wyatt asked the technicians to rehydrate the sample in normal saline, incubate it at body temperature for 72 hours, and then culture the white blood cells. And the results? Well, they boldly contradict standard biological science. A normal human has 46 chromosomes, right? 23 from the mother, 23 from the father. But the Israeli lab technicians reportedly found that this specific blood sample possessed only 24 chromosomes. It had the 23 maternal autosomes and an X chromosome from a human mother, but only a single Y chromosome, which was purportedly provided directly by God to determine maleness. The claim here is that this biological anomaly proves the blood belonged to someone with literally no earthly father.
Wyatt claimed those Israeli lab technicians were absolutely stunned. When they looked through the microscope, they reportedly started speaking rapidly in Hebrew, just totally washed over by the realization that they were looking at living cells from a completely unique genetic source. They were like, "Whose blood is this?" And when Wyatt replied that it was the blood of their Messiah, the sources suggest those men's lives were permanently changed. It's framed as this profound spiritual witness, entirely validated through biology.
All right, part 5, uncovering the 10 Commandments inside the Ark. So how do these biological findings interlock with the spiritual artifacts? Remember, the Ark wasn't just a fancy gold box. It housed the very foundation of biblical law. According to the sources, the chamber contained the original tables of stone. Wyatt described them as being made of granite, with the text written in continuous Proto-Aramaic script. He said it looked almost as if God's finger had written in soft butter before the stone hardened. The two tables were bound together by gold rings, and Wyatt claims an angel instructed him to actually take these tables out and place them on a ledge in the cave, just waiting to be revealed to the world at a highly specific, appointed time in the future.
And finally, Section 6, a final prophetic witness, the end times showdown. Let's see how all of this archaeological and biological data connects to overarching end times theology. Wyatt and his advocates believe that the Ark, the blood, and the 10 Commandments are not just neat historical curiosities. They are a dormant prophetic alarm clock. They assert that God kept this evidence hidden specifically to serve as an undeniable witness during a final global crisis. The narrative claims that soon, governments around the world will enforce a Sunday law, maybe under the guise of appeasing God during global disasters, or even as mandatory climate lockdowns. The sources assert this man-made law will directly conflict with God's original 10 Commandments, specifically the seventh-day Sabbath. And according to the angel Wyatt allegedly spoke to, the very moment this Sunday law is strictly enforced is when the video footage, the stone tablets, and those lab reports will be released to the entire world.
As we wrap up, we're left with a massive question to ponder. Will these extraordinary claims of ancient blood and hidden artifacts ultimately serve as a final prophetic witness to the modern world? The sources present Ron Wyatt's findings as a warning and a promise, a physical testament to ancient scriptures waiting quietly beneath the bedrock of Jerusalem. So whether you view this as an unverified legend, a profound spiritual test, or the ultimate archaeological triumph, the story of the hidden Ark really challenges us to consider what evidence might still be buried out there just waiting to speak to us today. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.